Yeah.
It seems like this kind of reflects, Paul Graham talked about why is piracy winning, the user experience is better.
Yeah.
Like he talked about the Titan News, that's the YouTube, that's the Viacom, that's the billion-dollar industry.
Mm-hmm.
But the next site that comes along that slices a little bit under that edge, it seems like they have a competitive advantage. So that's where the next viral video will come out.
The problem is that you know, if it's illegal, it gets, depending on how illegal it is, it gets progressively harder to host it, to capitalize it, to find, you know, to advertise it, to do any of those other things. And so the space of things that you can host gets smaller because, or things that you can make get smaller because you have to be able to essentially do them in this, what I call like antibiotic-resistant bacteria techniques, like, you know, doing, you know, trackerless BitTorrent and stuff. And trackerless BitTorrent's a really interesting and very clever use of technology, but it's, you know, the trackerless torrent sites don't have anything like the traffic of YouTube. And they don't have, and more importantly, the range of creators that can contribute to them is a lot smaller because they're necessarily more difficult to use because they have all this engineering considerations that are about making it hard to police them, not about making them easy to use. And sometimes those are antithetical to each other. So I'm not sanguine about it. I don't think like, I think that there's a certain kind of, this is like the inverse of the kind of neocon, the invisible hand will sort it all out. It's like the technological inevitability will sort it all out, right? Your inferior laws are irrelevant, our superior technology will trump it. And you know, I've been hearing people say that for a long time, and maybe it's true in the long run, but like how many martyrs will we have in the meantime? And you know, we are talking about something pretty critical here. We're talking about the mechanism by which people organize to do things collectively. And a lot of that's worthy and great and not political, like, you know, Little League games or potluck dinners. But it's also the basis of all political organizing for the foreseeable future. And the more constricted that becomes, the harder it will be to organize to actually resist bad law. So it's, I really think that it's like, as much as I think Paul's a smart guy, I'm not sanguine about it. I actually think it's really alarming.
Well, how do you feel about like Iceland's movements towards digital harbor, I guess, safe harbor?
They're for libel, yeah. So for background, some countries, mostly the UK, but a few others, have crazy libel laws, and the best way to understand them is that they were written by members of the government to give them the tools to sue newspapers that said bad things about them. And so in the UK, where I live, the libel law doesn't have, as a prima facie defense, it doesn't have the truth. So in other words, you can't go to a court after you've been sued for libel and say, but it's true, and prove that it's true, and have the judge go, okay, well, we're done here. You actually have to continue defending it because you have to prove that it wasn't malicious and all these other things. And it's just BS, right? And what it essentially does is it lets whoever has the most money decide what can be said in a public forum. And so Iceland, and there have been some really high-profile libel cases. Many of you might be familiar with the McLibel case, where two activists who'd written about McDonald's, true things about McDonald's, were essentially sued into a smoking hole. They became professional litigants for 10 years, lost everything they had, lost everything all their friends had, all the money they could borrow in the world, and then, you know, won a very hollow victory after being silenced, essentially. And Simon Singh, who's a very eminent science writer, one of the great science writers of the day, wrote a piece about all the crazy things chiropractors claim they can do, including curing cancer, and there's a thing called craniosacral therapy for infants where they just wave their hands over your baby and declare your baby to be better, and they use it as a treatment for colic. And the thing about colic is it just gets better on its own. And so sometimes, if like every colicky baby goes to see a chiropractor for this treatment or multiple treatments, some percentage of them will get better pretty quickly after they've had the treatment because it just gets better on its own. And this is why we say correlation is not causation. So he wrote these things that were true, and the Chiropractors Association sued him, and he spent something like £200,000 in 3 years defending this claim, stopped being a science writer and became a litigant, and he eventually won. And it has really sparked this libel reform movement. So anyway, Iceland has proposed that they could become a libel haven. And I'm not sure exactly how that works, because the thing is that the way that libel, the way that this libel stuff works, this abusive libel works, is you go forum shopping, right? So like, say someone says something nasty about you in America, but you find out that they have some assets in the UK or in a country that has a treaty with the UK that allows them to attach assets, like the EU. You don't sue them in America, where the First Amendment would trump the libel claim. You sue them in Britain, you get a judgment against them, and then you take all their assets that are in the EU and in Britain, right? I don't know how that would work. Like, if, you know, I live in the UK, and like I have my savings there and stuff, and we own a little flat, and would that mean that I would have to like transfer my mortgage to an Icelandic bank and save all my money in an Icelandic bank? I guess that's how it does work, and you know, Iceland did this once before, pretty recently, where they basically created these very high interest rates to encourage people to do all their banking, get their mortgages with them. It didn't work out so well. We'll see. I don't know how many times we're going to allow the Icelandics to destroy the world before we finally take them in hand. There's only like, 300,000 of them. How hard would it be?
They've got volcanoes.
They've got volcanoes. But like, no one ever called Iceland the graveyard of empires. I mean, let's invade!
Then you're stuck with Iceland.
Yeah, then you're stuck with Iceland. You own Bjork. Once you own Bjork, you've got to use Bjork. Actually, you could export Iceland's vowels to Kyrgyzstan and kind of average them. Yeah.
I read Little Brother.
Uh-huh.
I loved it. But are there any other lessons for my generation that I should take from the book?
How old are you?
16.
Oh, 16. Okay, lessons for your generation that you should take from Little Brother. I guess the big lesson in Little Brother that everyone seems to miss is that generational politics are really corrosive, right? Everyone remembers the scenes in which there's people shouting from the stage, "Don't trust anyone over 25," and forgets, all those of you who haven't read the book, put your fingers in your ears and hum, forget that in the ending, he can only succeed by building coalitions that transcend arbitrary distinctions like how old you are. Everyone seems to miss that. Yeah?
One thing we're hearing a lot about now is the whole cyberwar thing. Which
Yeah.
is essentially government of government, but it has a lot of implications for ordinary users of the internet. What do you see the role of consumers being, internet users being, in terms of we don't want a PLA second directorate reading everybody's email, but we don't want NSA doing it either?
I guess I don't think that there is such a thing as cyberwar. I come down with like Bruce Schneier and other security people. I think that and Ryan Singal at Wired. I think that cyberwar is one of those things like War on Terror, where if you define an insoluble problem and then make a large budget available to solve it, you will find lots of contractors who will come forward with magic beans they can sell you to solve your insoluble problem. And since none of them ever do, you can go on allocating budget to it forever, right? I mean, I think that there's just war. I think most of the claims that we've heard about cyberwar, like, the right attack would make the entire power grid fail, just seem really dumb on their face. And where we've seen supposed cyber war, like attacks on the Estonian Russian cyber war, it turned out to be just like groups of teenagers kind of DOSing each other's servers, and it wasn't a cyber war as near as anyone could work out. I guess there is espionage, right? The stuff that what are they called in Toronto? Citizen Lab uncovered with the Chinese malware that had compromised a lot of embassies around the world, and was even remotely activating their webcams and like listening in on them and stuff. That sounds to me like espionage, but I guess there comes a point at where you have to ask, like, is this cyber espionage or just espionage, right? Like we don't call reading someone's mail postal espionage, right? Douglas Adams said that no one ever said a crime was committed using the interstate highway system, although most are, right? Especially around here, where you can't go anywhere without getting on an interstate, right? And so there comes a point where you just have to ask yourself, how is this cyber crime as opposed to just crime? And why is it useful to characterize it as cybercrime and put a lot of energy into the cyber part of it as opposed to the crime part of it? Money. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you can allocate. It's a bottomless hole into which you can shovel contractor dollars. How are we doing for time? I guess maybe like one more question, then I'll sign some books. Sound good? Anyone want to be the last question? Yeah.